I spent years exploring religions all around the world after growing up in a Catholic and then Episcopal church in a small town in rural Colorado. Those years I spent searching, I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew what I wasn't looking for. I didn't like the dogma. I saw people who had found faith communities, and they completely believed in them. They had fully supported. That seemed to be like a second home for them. They had something I hadn't ever experienced, and I'd hoped for that was out there for me too. My search started in college and was based on an intuitive feeling that there was a better way to make meaning, to find community, to live out my values than what I had previously experienced. I was looking for something that matched what I held to be true, something that didn't require compromise. I hadn't found anything that I could believe in wholeheartedly. I'd completely stopped going to church, but I missed the routine of it. More than a decade passed, and I realized that that the rhythms was something that I wanted to start building out for our family traditions. Hymns that we knew, rituals that were familiar and comforting, something to say before eating a meal, people who knew us. And it felt like it needed to be close to home, so it wasn't a big effort to get there. This decade away from religion was really my process of growing up. It also meant that I had developed my own ideas about politics, the environment, human rights, among other things, that didn't clearly align with the formal religion that I was familiar with at the time. Maybe Buddhism, but that felt intimidating to try to join as a family. It seemed like such a solitary practice that there were no temples nearby, and ultimately the notion of life is suffering was a challenging foundational premise for me. And what about sacredness of the earth and nature? That too was fundamental, but it didn't seem to play a big enough part in the other religious traditions I was familiar with. Once our girls started school, my wife and I decided that it was time to introduce them to formal religious education. A friend told us about UUCWF, and we started attending, though not without some trepidation. When I started looking at what I value and what UU's value, I was surprised that I hadn't found this sooner. Looking back, I realized that we had been to an event at the First UU Church in Portland, a book reading by Mary Pfeiffer, but it never occurred to me to inquire about why that event was held where it was. So when we found this community, I came in a little skeptical. I was cautious that I would find something that didn't align with my values, something that just didn't feel right. As I went through the 7 principles, a few of them really resonated with me. Worth and dignity of every person, no exceptions. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning, maybe there isn't just one way. And the right of conscience and the democratic process. There goes original sin. And the interdependence web of all of existence. There's my natural world piece. A few things really sealed the deal for me. Learning that the congregation calls a minister to serve us instead of the other way around, instead of it being dictated by a larger church entity. It doesn't get much more democratic than that. Hearing readings and poetry by people like Mary Oliver, Wendell Berry, Brian Doyle being read from the pulpit, and some of the rituals that now have become second nature for our family. Songs like Blue Boat Home, meditation on breathing, and singing our children out to RE, as well as a wide variety of music that is sung and played from the dais. Knowing that people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, a few of our presidents, and even P.T. Barnum made me feel like we were in good company. Ultimately, this is the community that helps me live out my values and be a better person.
When I was in seminary, one of my favorite professors, David Bumbaugh, said that because Unitarian Universalists don't hold a common set of beliefs, that we tend to hold more values in common than almost any other faith tradition. And so on this Bring a Friend Sunday, I'm going to spend a little time unpacking that sentence. What does it mean that we don't have a common set of beliefs? What values are we talking about exactly? And is this a place where I could fit in? Hopefully some of you have already figured that out. People new to Unitarian Universalism sometimes use the shorthand of, it's a church where you can believe whatever you want. And this phrase drives ministers a little batty. And my favorite response was from a congregant a very long time ago named Sunshine Glenn, who said Universalism doesn't mean believing nothing, and it doesn't mean believing whatever you want to. Rather, it means believing what your soul must and living your life accordingly. The true part of that earlier statement about how you can believe whatever you want is because we don't have a creed. A creed is a common statement of belief, and if you grew up Catholic or Protestant, you probably recited the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed or something like that. And for some folks who have come out of Christian churches, it makes sense that the fact that we don't have a creed is one of the most important things about us. And while folks who are very happy in their Christian churches may find our lack of a creed disturbing, there are also a lot of people who left their former churches because of those creeds, or what they implied. Because there were things there that they just couldn't believe anymore. Because they didn't believe that it wasn't fair, because they believed it wasn't fair that women didn't get to be priests. Because they didn't believe that God hated their gay sister or their gay neighbor or their gay self. Because they actually read the book and they know that Jesus talked a whole lot more about hunger and homelessness than he did about abortion and homosexuality. And so it's reasonable that the first thing you might latch onto is the fact that we don't have a creed. We don't have very much dogma. We don't tell you exactly what you have to believe. We welcome your questions, and we don't think we have the only answers. If you've been hurt by the beliefs of a former church, or if you just can't believe that stuff anymore about the virgin birth, or if you don't care which side of God Jesus is sitting on, we are a welcoming place. But when you don't have beliefs in common, you have to have something. And so for Unitarian Universalists, that tends to be values. Well, we have no creedal test. We do covenant around a series of principles and purposes, or principles and sources that guide our thinking and explain what it is that we do believe. I know when I first started attending Unitarian Universalist congregations in the late 1990s, I was very frustrated when I asked somebody, what does this church believe? And the answer that I got was, well, we're not Christian. I found that a really unsatisfactory answer because you are right, we might be. And I wanted a positive statement of belief, not a negative one. Tell me what you are, don't tell me what you aren't. And so when someone finally explained the 7 principles to me, I was thrilled because here was a solid, clear explanation of values that these folks held in common. And they are, as we sung, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. In order to get to those principles, the folks who redid the principles in the mid-1980s added 6 sources. And they said the living tradition which we share draws from many sources. Direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. We believe in mystery and wonder, and we believe in our own experiences of mystery and wonder. Number 2, words and deeds of prophetic people which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Number 3, wisdom from the world's traditions which inspires us in our ethical and social and spiritual life. Number 4, Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. Number 5, humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. And number 6, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred cycle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Now, most religious traditions would call that good. And fortunately, one of the really neat things about Unitarian Universalism is that we don't believe that Revelation is sealed. It is not only that we don't believe that Revelation was sealed in a book written approximately 2,000 years ago, but we don't think something written in the 1980s is necessarily the be-all, end-all either. And so, like we believe that science is real and humans keep discovering cool stuff, and so we're going to change our minds based on what is factually proven, because our ancestors thought that the sun revolved around the earth, and now we know better, so we do better, right? And so we adapt and we change as we learned more. I am really aware of the time, and I am going to cut this giant chunk from this, and I shouldn't tell you that I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to talk to you for a minute. Okay. Unitarians, Universalists, humanists. Unitarians start at the time of Jesus, believed that Jesus didn't claim to be divine, and if you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus didn't claim to be divine. They thought that there was one God, that we followed Jesus, not worshiped him. Universalists believed that God was too good to damn anyone to hell, that direct response to Calvinism, sinners in the hand of an angry God. No. You know, if God is supposed to be some loving, benevolent parent, you know, why is he going to throw half of us in hell? And certainly why is he going to throw half of us in hell if we haven't heard the right story? Just doesn't make any sense. Humanism is the idea that you can be good without God, and that because humanists don't believe particularly in an all-powerful, omniscient God who runs everything and knows exactly how it's supposed to be, and so we sort of feel like it's our job to make this world a better place in the here and now. Those 3 strands make up Unitarian Universalism. The Unitarians and Universalists merged in 1961, became the Unitarian Universalist Association. We are a less Christian association than our forebears probably were, to be sure, And yet Christianity, and particularly the person of Jesus, inspires a lot of us as a model of social justice. You get to believe what you want to believe about God. You get to believe what you want to believe about Jesus. You get to practice whatever spiritual practices enrich and nurture your spirit. But what we value together are those things that are in our principles. We value kindness. We value compassion. We value justice. We value the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And so what does that mean practically right now? Because those are all good statements that no one's going to disagree with, really. It's like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of compassion. So instead, we take those and we say, so what does that mean? So what that means, honestly, is that we believe Black Lives Matter. We believe that LGBTQ people are whole and holy and good. We believe that no person is illegal, and so no matter what you think about particular immigration laws, ain't nobody supposed to be pulling kids from parents when they cross over a border trying to get their kids safe and healthy and whole. And so right now, we have a group of people who are looking at our principles and taking a bunch of information from folks and doing a lot of surveys. You know what the number one thing that they realize that is totally missing from our principles, but is our key value as a group of people? Anybody guess? Love. We, as a denomination, as a people, are centered around love. In almost any Unitarian Universalist church, you are going to have some people who find God language really helpful because that's where they came from. I believe in a creative force in the universe that I am comfortable calling God. That's okay. And you are always welcome to put on your universal translator and put that into words that make sense to you. And almost always a word that works for almost everybody here is love. We believe that love calls us to be people of kindness and justice and compassion. We believe that love calls us to go out and feed our neighbors. We believe that love calls us to do better and be better and keep striving, to ask for forgiveness, to do repair, to build community together. Love calls us to do these things. This is what we value. This is who we are. You are welcome to join us. We're going to call it good and say, blessed be and amen.